It is standard good policing to direct your resources to where the threat is coming from. We should do the exact same thing with radical Islamic terrorism.
Ted Cruz calling for more targeted policing of Muslim neighborhoods in America so we don't become the next Brussels, but President Obama begs to differ.
I just left a country that engages in that kind of neighborhood surveillance, which, by the way, the father of Senator Cruz escaped for America, the land of the free. It's contrary to who we are. And it's not going to help us defeat ISIL.
So who's got it right to keep us safe from terrorists? Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling. Welcome to Cashing In. Our Cashing In crew this week: Jonathan Honig, Jessica Tarlov, Gina Loudon, and Morgan Ortega. So welcome, everybody. Now, Gina, who's got it right, Ted Cruz or the Nobel Peace Prize winner, President Obama?
Hands down, Ted Cruz on this one for sure. You know, you can hardly compare. We are at war right now, Eric, and I think that's the part that Obama seems to not recognize while he's out dancing and golfing and doing the wave at baseball games. This is a real, true insurgent war. And we're talking about keeping all neighborhoods safe. We're talking about keeping people around the mosques safe, too, because if any area is at risk, it would be where the hotbed of the activity is going on. But that makes all Americans safer. This is not the same thing as what Obama's trying to compare it to as, for example, in Cuba, where they arrest people for free speech. It's a totally different thing.
John, are we violating anyone's personal liberties by maybe having a little extra scrutiny on areas that we may think there may be some hotbeds of terror?
It's bewildering to me, Eric. I mean, Muslim Americans' rights are upheld more in America here than they are anywhere else in the world. And I think to Gina's point, I mean, jihadism is at war with the West, and it needs to be destroyed, not just degraded, not just deferred, as Obama talks about when he's, doing the lambada, the tango, or whatever it is. Now, I think it's going to necessitate a total war in the Middle East, Iran and Saudi Arabia. But in the interim, I mean, at least working with these Muslim communities, just as we work with gang communities where there's gang violence being festered and recruitment being festered, work with these communities where there's possible hotbeds of local homegrown terrorism, because you know what? It's Obama's job to protect those communities as well.
Now, Jess, so some people on the left are saying if you go ahead and target these Muslim communities or even specific mosques, that would be considered profiling. But, good police work has the tendency to be kind of like profiling.
A little bit, but what Ted Cruz is citing, he's talked about what happened in New York City, and NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton came out and said that Ted Cruz doesn't know what he's talking about. The program that he's referring to was disbanded in 2014 because it was a complete failure. There was not one conviction, not one piece of usable intelligence that they got off of, I think it was 8 years of doing this. So I understand what Ted Cruz is saying, but he's just riling people up, and frankly that policy, I believe, would make us less safe. And there are 2 lawsuits that had to be settled against the NYPD, and they're revising their procedures.
Jess, let's be honest here. Ted Cruz wasn't saying specifically like the NYPD.
He cited, no, he said the NYPD.
Correct. However, he's saying Muslim neighborhoods in America, not New York City.
Well, he used that as the model. That is the model. I mean, we know 9/11 happened here, obviously. Everyone's going to look to New York as the example. And the fact that he cited it means that he wants to do it this way or put out some details. That's my other problem with this. There's no white paper. There's no plan. He just says patrol and secure. What does that mean, Ted Cruz, before you go into Muslim neighborhoods?
Now, well, hold on, John. Let me just get Morgan in here. There is a very large Somali population in the Twin Cities near Minneapolis, Morgan. Would it be wrong if there was extra scrutiny per Ted Cruz put on those neighborhoods?
Eric, I think law enforcement officials need to use a threat-based approach whenever enforcing their communities. We have Muslim Americans who have fought and died fighting for this country. They're in the FBI, they're in the CIA. So there's no reason, as John pointed out, that law enforcement communities can't work with Muslim communities the way that they do with gang communities. And of course there's Somalis and parts of Michigan and Minnesota, but there's also no such thing really as Muslim communities in America. Muslims live side by side with Christians and Jews, and that's what makes this country great. But this fight ignores the reality of how do we really fight ISIS. We're talking about what we're doing in America, but the truth is there is no stopping or defeating ISIS unless we go after their caliphate in Iraq and Syria.
Right, right. No, but yeah, true. We would all, well, most of us would agree. Most of us.
The president would not agree with that.
Would agree with that. But let's explain this.
Leader of ISIS. That's nothing. Obama doesn't know where more than
numbers. Hold on, Jess. We're staying on this neighborhood with scrutiny, extra scrutiny for Muslim neighborhoods comment that Ted Cruz suggested. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, and there's tremendous political... When I talk about political correctness, Eric, this is exactly it. This notion that somehow, you know, if we patrol, if we do investigations, if we do police work in America to keep Americans safe, somehow you're going to radicalize people that are already here simply by doing their job. Your job, and that is the president's job, to eliminate radical Islam wherever it is, whether it's in mosques, whether it's in churches or synagogues or schools or anywhere else. That's his primary job, and I think he's not doing it. In fact, he's dropping the ball because, as Gina talked about, he's comparing police work with the destruction of individual rights as happens in Cuba on a daily basis.
Let me throw something at Gina. Gina, let me just throw this at you. So in Brussels, now Brussels has not been known to send a lot of fighters into the fight against terror, against ISIS. I would say France has, and the other neighboring country, Germany, has. Brussels hasn't, and look what happened. The terrorists killed 30-something in Brussels. So Jonathan's right. Playing around and trying to protect their feelings, the terrorist feelings, so they don't get mad at us, this PC stuff is getting people killed.
It is, and we can't just fight this war abroad. This is an insurgent war. And to keep Americans, all you have to do, Eric, is look back as far as San Bernardino. I mean, this happened, and that wasn't even that long ago. This has happened on American soil. It is the jihadists who have promised us that this will happen again on American soil. We have to take more action on American soil. It's that simple.
Just honestly, do you not want specific areas looked at with more scrutiny than others?
What areas?
Because they may have... Well, okay, all right.
It's just like patting down Granny at the airport.
Right, and we're not suggesting we take away all people's civil liberties. I'm not suggesting that. That's why there is a line for at the airport, as Jonathan points out.
And then they're just making these broad brush declarations, which is what Ted Cruz was doing here. We had this from Donald Trump as well. Go into the mosques. Ban Muslims. There needs to be specificity about what you're talking about. And Ted Cruz came out and suggested this in light of what happened in Brussels. But guess what? The population of Brussels, they 6% are Muslim. We're 1% Muslim for the entire nation. They're the second most educated group here. 10% of Muslims in America are doctors.
But you know,
I mean,
once again, there's a straw man here
going on
there's
about
just a terrible
Muslims in this country.
Yeah, but there's a smear. But you're doing a straw man. You're saying that Ted Cruz or any of these candidates are talking about surveilling every single Muslim, knocking on every single Muslim door. That's not what they're talking about.
Jonathan, then you give me, if I'm a straw man, you give me a plan with specificity, and I will.
All right, here, hold on, guys. Stop. I'll give you an example. Wait, hold on, Gina. Guys, hold on. Allow me to do this, Jessica. Do you remember in San Bernardino that Jonathan points out? Do you remember that neighbors saw boxes going into that home, the home of the which would be bombers? Hold on, and the neighbors said this: I didn't want to say anything that looked suspicious because I didn't want to seem racist.
I know. And we talked about it, and I agreed with the panel that day. Remember, if you see something, say something, of course. I understand the importance of targeted policing. What I don't understand is why the Republican candidates are riling people up.
Just, I got to go, but I will tell you something. Most of America agrees with what the Republican candidates are saying. A majority of Americans agree with that. Really?
Show me a big bunch of liberals who think that it's the right idea.
It's not the Republican candidates riling people up.
America. Liberals aren't Americans now?
Do you understand the difference between a majority and you picking out a specific group?
Yes,
they were not part of the majority. They were part of the minority.
Republicans either.
Coming up, House Speaker Paul Ryan.